If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. They say the Stanley Hotel is haunted, but nobody warns you about the parts that shouldn't exist at all. The parts that change. The parts that were never built, but somehow are still there, waiting. I didn't go looking for ghosts. I wasn't some thrill seeker waving an EMF reader around begging for attention. I just needed a place to sleep, and the Stanley had a room available, or at least I thought it did. It was late autumn, the kind of cold that gnaws at your bones, where the mountains loom black against the bruised sky. When I pulled into the lot, the Stanley looked beautiful, lights glowing in every window, the kind of old world charm you only see in the movies. The front desk clerk barely looked up when I checked in, just slid a key across the counter without a smile. A real metal key, not a card. Room 237. I didn't think twice. The corridor leading to my room was longer than it should have been. The carpet pattern seemed to stretch forever under the flickering lights. Every 10 steps or so, I passed a mirror, all identical, all slightly warped. In every reflection, I noticed something off. My reflection lagged behind me by a split second, just enough to notice, just enough to feel wrong. Room 237 was at the end of the hall, a heavy oak door, the brass knuckles worn and tarnished. The key fit perfectly, and the door creaked open with a long, sighing groan. Inside was normal. Well, at first. Queen-size bed, faded armchair in the corner, a small writing desk, and a window overlooking the dark tree line at the back of the hotel. I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress sagged too much, like something heavy had been lying there a long, long time. The air smelled faintly of mildew and old roses. I decided to get my bearings. There was a hotel map tucked into a leather folder on the desk. I unfolded it. Every room neatly marked, every wing labelled, except room 237. It wasn't on it. There was 236, 238, but no 237, like it had been skipped or erased. I told myself it didn't matter. Hotels renumber all the time. Maybe it was a superstition. Maybe it was nothing. I told myself a lot of things that night, and most of them turned out to be lies. It started around 2:13 AM. 3 slow knocks, coming from the wall behind the bed. Not the door, not the window, the wall. I sat up, I held my breath, and I listened. Another 3 knocks, then silence. I crossed the room, and I pressed my ear against the wall. Nothing, just cold plaster, and then, very faintly, breathing, not my own. The knocks came again at 3 AM, harder, insistent, and the wall trembled slightly with each hit. And this time, a thin crack split across the plaster, a line running vertically from the floor to about waist height, like a hidden seam, a door. I stepped back, my heart hammering so loud I could barely hear myself think. The air grew colder and my breath misted in the dark. The seam widened, just a sliver, just enough to see that beyond the crack there was another room. Dark, endless, breathing. I didn't stay there to find out what was inside. I grabbed my bag and I tore open the door to the hallway and froze. The hallway had changed. It wasn't the flush carpeted corridor I walked earlier. It was longer, narrower, lit by a single swinging light bulb that buzzed like an angry hornet. The walls were peeling, the mirrors were gone. I ran down the hall, past door after door, all closed, all identical. No numbers, no signs, just blank, faceless doors lining the endless hall. Every few feet, I thought I heard something behind me, a soft, dragging sound, like bare feet on carpet, keeping pace. At last, I found the elevator, an ancient, rusted thing with iron grate doors. I slammed the button, and the elevator groaned awake, creeped upwards towards me. When it arrived, the door slid open, revealing nothing, just a gaping black hole, no floor, no light, a bottomless shaft yawning open like a mouth. And from deep, deep inside, I heard the knocks. Free, slow, patient. I stumbled back, I turned, and there it was, standing at the end of the hall, a figure. Tall, thin, skin the colour of dirty parchment, its mouth too wide, smiling, waiting. It raised one hand, knocked once against the wall beside it, and the sound echoed all the way down the hall, deep and wrong, like knocking against a hollow coffin. I ran, no plan, no direction, just away. The hallway bent sharply, then again. I swear I ran in circles for hours. No doors opened, no windows appeared, only endless corridors, endless carpets, endless breathing darkness. Finally, by some miracle, I found a stairwell, metal, cold, real under my hands. I stumbled down flight after flight, every step creaking like the building itself was protesting, and then an exit door, a sign glowing green above it, lobby. I threw myself through the door and collapsed into the real lobby, bright, noisy, alive. The front desk clerk barely looked up, just smiled blandly and said, "Checking out?" I drove for 3 hours before I dared to stop, parked at a truck stop miles away and sat shaking in the driver's seat until the sun came up. I never went back, I never asked for an explanation, never contacted the Stanley again. But sometimes, when I pass a mirror in a hotel hallway, I see something behind me. Tall, thin, smiling, knocking softly against the glass. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. But if you ever stay at the Stanley and they give you the room 237, don't open the door at night, and if you ever hear knocking, don't answer. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. Elevators always scared me a little. There's something unnatural about them. The way you step into a little metal box and trust it to carry you through dead air, to open onto the right place, to open onto a world you still recognise. But the thing is, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the doors open and you're not anywhere you should be. It happened to me at the Roosevelt Hotel. I was in Los Angeles for a conference. The Roosevelt was cheaper than usual, a last-minute deal, and hey, I'd heard the ghost stories. Marilyn Monroe's mirror, the little girl in the hallway, but I didn't believe in that stuff, or at least I thought I didn't. I checked in late. The lobby was huge, all dim chandeliers and cold marble, footsteps echoing too loudly. The staff smiled politely but didn't linger, like they were trying to get me upstairs as fast as possible. My room was on the 10th floor, 1007, nice enough, faded glamour, a cracked mirror, and a slightly sour smell, like someone had spilled champagne decades ago and never cleaned it up properly. I dropped my bag and I headed back down for a drink, told myself it was to unwind after the flight. Truth was, I didn't want to be alone up there just yet. Not in the room, not with that mirror. Around midnight, I decided to head back up. The bar was emptying out and the city outside had that dead glow that only big cities get when they're too tired to be dangerous. I pressed the button for the elevator. The door slid open immediately, empty. I stepped inside and pressed 10. The doors closed, the elevator shuddered and began to rise. I remember the hum of the old machinery, the dim yellow lights, the little scruff marks on the walls, all normal, all fine, until we passed the 7th floor. The elevator lurched, not stopped, not exactly, just shifted, like something had grabbed it mid-air, held it, tilted it ever so slightly off reality. The floor counter blinked, 8, 9, 10, then nothing. No ding, no slowing, just a dead stop, and the door slid open. At first, it looked normal, carpeted hallway, dimmed lights on the walls, room doors lining either side. But then the little details started to creep in. The carpet was the wrong colour, a deep green, stained black in places, and the walls were grimy. The air was cold and wet, like standing inside a mouth, and the doors, every one of them hung slightly open, just a crack, just enough to suggest someone or something was waiting behind them. I stepped forward because what else do you do? The elevator's door slid shut behind me without waiting, without asking. The hallway stretched ahead, longer than it should have been, longer than the building itself could possibly contain. As I passed the rooms, I could hear breathing, low, wheezing, ragged, but when I peeked through one cracked door, the room was empty, barren, just bare concrete floors and peeling walls, no furniture, no bed, no windows, nothing except the breathing, always just out of sight. At the end of the hallway stood a woman, dressed in a 1950s cocktail dress, face powdered too pale, eyes too wide, lips pulled back in a rictus smile. She didn't move, didn't blink, just smiled, and behind her, more figures began to appear. Men in dusty suits, women in torn dresses, children barefoot and blank-eyed, all of them smiling, all of them moving closer. I turned, ran, I sprinted back towards the elevator, slamming the button over and over. The doors opened far too slowly. I threw myself inside. The crowd was almost on me. I caught a glimpse as the doors closed, hands reaching out, mouths opening too wide, blackness spilling from their throats like smoke. The elevator dropped, faster than it should have, a free fall. I braced for impact, but it stopped, smooth as silk. The doors opened. I stumbled out gasping. I found myself in the lobby, except it wasn't the lobby, not really. The chandeliers dripped, literally dripping, heavy black oil patterning on the floor. The bellhop at the desk had no face, just smooth skin stretched over an empty skull, and when he tilted his head towards me, I heard all the whispering at once. "Stay, stay, stay." I bolted for the main doors, pushed them open, and the city outside was wrong too. The buildings were crooked, the sky was bruised black, and the streets rippled like water. I ran anyway. I don't know how I made it back to my room, or how I ever left the hotel. All I know is that when I woke up the next morning, my shoes were wet, and the soles were stained black. I checked out without speaking. I got in my car and drove until the Roosevelt was a memory in my rearview mirror. But sometimes, when I ride elevators now, the floor counter blinks wrong, and sometimes the doors open too soon, onto places that don't exist, onto people who shouldn't be smiling. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. But the next time the elevator doesn't stop on the right floor, I don't think I'll be able to leave. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. Some places don't just remember the dead, they invite them back in. Not loudly, not violently, just subtly. A whisper at the edge of your hearing, a wait in a room that's already too cold. At the Crescent Hotel, They don't need to chase you screaming through the halls. They only need to open a door and let something else walk in. I didn't want to stay there. It was my girlfriend's idea, Melissa. She was obsessed with ghost stories, urban legends, anything that could make her skin crawl. And when she found out we'd be driving through Arkansas, she booked us a night at the famous Crescent Hotel. "Room 214, she said, grinning across the table as she tapped the confirmation email. "It's supposed to be one of the most haunted." I laughed, told her she was ridiculous. She laughed too, but neither of us would be laughing by the time we left. The hotel looked normal enough at first. Big old stone building perched on the side of a hill, wrapped in misty woods. Inside, the floors creaked, the wallpapers peeled slightly at the edges, the chandeliers flickered when the lobby doors opened to let the wind in. But all that felt charming, historic, safe. A front desk clerk handed over our room key, a real, heavy brass key, without smiling. "You're in the east wing, room 214, end of the hall." Her voice was flat, like she was reading a sentence she didn't want to say. We took the old elevator up, passed by faded portraits of guests who hadn't smiled for 100 years. The carpet muffled our steps, the hall smelled of old wood, roses, and something faintly metallic underneath it all. Blood, maybe, but that's the kind of thing you only realise after it's too late. The room was small, a queen bed, tiny writing desk, an antique mirror over a cracked fireplace, and a window overlooking the forest, black and shivering in the night breeze. At first, it was fine. We dumped our bags, changed into pyjamas, and snuggled under the heavy old quilt. Melissa teased me about being nervous. I pretended not to be, but neither of us slept. Around 2:30 a.m, I heard whispering, faint. At first, I thought it was Melissa talking in her sleep, but when I turned to look at her, she was wide awake, eyes open, mouth clamped shut, staring at the ceiling. I whispered her name. She didn't move, didn't blink, just kept staring upwards, her whole body rigid. The whispering grew louder, more distant, like 100 voices overlapping, all too fast to understand, but one word kept surfacing over and over again. Give, give, give him to us. The mirror above the fireplace fogged over, words scrawled in the mist. He doesn't belong to you. I shook her. I screamed her name. Finally, she blinked, sucked in a ragged breath, sat up, gasping like she's been drowning. After that night, she wasn't the same, not immediately. At first, it was the small things. She forgot basic details, where we were going, what our plans were. She stared at her reflection too long in shop windows. Sometimes, her face would twitch, just slightly, when she thought I wasn't looking. Then came the sleepwalking. I'd wake up to find her standing by the window, hands pressed against the glass, murmuring things I couldn't understand. One night, I found her at the foot of the bed, smiling, eyes wide open, saying, "They're almost here." The final night, I tried to leave, packed our bags in the middle of the night. I told her we were going home. She didn't fight, didn't argue, just smiled that too wide smile and followed me to the lobby. As I checked out, I looked back. At the top of the staircase leading to the second floor, I saw them, crowd of people, dressed in old clothes, grey faces, eyes hollow, all watching, all smiling, waiting. And in the centre of them, Melissa, or something wearing her skin. She waved. I drove for hours. I didn't stop until the gas tank was almost dry. I didn't answer the phone when she called. I didn't open the door when she knocked, because it wasn't her, not anymore. Sometimes, late at night, my phone buzzes, a text from a number with no name attached. Just 2 words. Come back. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it, but I know someday I'll hear them knock again, and next time I might not have the strength to say no.